Hello and good evening. Welcome. Today is Tuesday, September 27th, 2022, and this is a special meeting with executive session of the Governing Board of the Litchfield Elementary School District. I hereby call this meeting to order.
President Moran, point of order. I would like to request or make a motion that we move public comment to the beginning of our agenda tonight to allow for our speakers to go ahead of our discussions.
I will second that motion. Before I call for the vote, I just wanted to add a point of clarity that our board policies do allow us to rearrange the order of items on the agenda, which would include this request from board members item A. So having a first and a second, I will call for the vote. All those in favor of moving the community opportunity for comment to next on our agenda item, please vote accordingly.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. So we will, I'm sorry, Representative Honak, did you say something?
It
Okay.
wasn't me that said something other than I said aye a minute ago.
Okay, no problem. Dr. Dowling, did you have
I
a
had a
comment?
late, yes.
Okay, great. We'll take that into consideration. Okay, so motion carries. So we will actually then go ahead and move to the community opportunity for comment. I will read the disclaimer. Pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, this agenda item provides an open call to the public, allowing individuals to address the governing board on any issue within the jurisdiction of the board. Items not listed on the agenda may be brought to the governing board's attention under this section of the agenda. Due to the Arizona open meeting law, the governing board cannot discuss or take any action on items not listed on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, response to public comment about matters not appearing on the agenda will be limited to individual board members who may ask staff to study the matter, respond to a criticism, or ask that the matter be put on a future agenda for further consideration and decision at a later date. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and no more than 30 minutes will be devoted to the public comment portion of the agenda. When you approach the podium, please state your name for the record. This evening, we have two public members who would like to comment. The first is Cynthia Schwartz.
Cynthia Schwartz. There's no question that everyone in this room wants the best for LESD, but the question is who will lead us in 2023? The responsibility starts at the top of the governing board. Looking back over the past 1.5 years, board meetings have been filled with drama. We all remember the April 21st meeting. Kim Moran held up a sign "Not True" when two members of the public spoke. Her actions were unprofessional and rude, causing a frenzy during the meeting. Drama, drama, drama. The video of the April meeting was reposted on YouTube, and it had over more than 500,000 hits by viewers all over the US. Everybody loves a good drama. More drama. On August 13th, the Attorney General's office issued the following statement about her "Not True" sign. Quote, "Not only were Ms. Moran's actions inappropriate, they were in violation of the open meeting law. Ms. Moran's actions are extremely concerning." More drama. The AG's letter also found that the board violated the OML by taking a closed-door approach to the equity statement effort that was led by Kim Moran, and she was involved in the secret TEW efforts. Her actions ignited a division between parents and residents in the district. That division might never be healed. More drama. The AG's office issued a letter on July 26th saying that Ms. Moran attended OML training. This is the second violation she's had in the last 12 months. The drama never goes away. Kamab Bell hosts a show on CNN called United Shades of America. He's a comedian and a political provocateur. In May, Kamab Bell traveled to the Valley to explore education, and to no surprise, the first episode focused on the drama in LESD. This November, voters can cast their ballots for 2 governing board members. There's 3 eligible, including Kim Moran. The district has had enough of Ms. Moran's drama. Let's move forward. There's 2 other candidates who want the best for LESD also, and don't come with baggage and drama. I asked Danielle Clymer, and Melissa Zudema to publicly or privately vote to end the drama in LESD caused by Kim Moran and support the other two candidates. I have 38 seconds left. There are signs out on the road that say no tax increase, rate increase for the override. And I just want to tell you, it's not a way to communicate. I don't know who's putting these signs out, but it's causing more confusion. And it does not allow for transparency and so for what this override is all about. There are many of us, we will support the Agua Fria override. We will not support the LASD, and it all comes down to transparency.
Our next speaker is Mike Finnegan.
Can I have your attention, please? For the past 7 years, in the LASD 79 school district, the average percentage of all students not proficient in academic math is 49%, and all students not proficient in academic English is 46%. The LASD school district currently has 10,400 students. These test results seem to indicate that 50% of 5,200 students are not proficient, a tragedy. This year has been a huge amount of new positions created and personnel changes. For example, new deputy superintendent of academic success, a new $130,000 position, a new outside person, new director of curriculum and professional development, former principal of Palm Valley, new district math coach, a math teacher at L. Thomas Heck. 13 math specialists were approved. I don't know how many pulled from classrooms and how many have not been hired yet. New district reading coach, Allison Paterno, special reading specialist from Bayland Soto, another pool. New director of white tanks, Melissa McComb, 5 new school principals. New director of HR, Leanne Reitz, new director of student information, Timothy Miller, director of purchasing, Misty Gomez, new director of finance, Michael Vaughn, new director of community relations, Sam Nunez, and a communications specialist, Carrie Stack, new director of transportation, Nathan White, new position, and new director of safety, Sergio Benales, new district instructional coach for technology, new project manager, plus 3 new technicians. No one in the LSD school district leadership is held responsible for bad academic outcomes, and therefore no one has had any reason to change. You do not need to compare your school district results with the state, a bad to worse comparison, or any other districts. You need to look within yourselves. You need to compare your previous year's results with your current year's results for growth and proficiency and act accordingly. Changes, choices, and competition are happening in the West Valley. And now it's time for new board leadership and new superintendent leadership. Replace Kim Moran, here since 2018. Why? Open meeting violation laws. Brought extreme negativity publicity to the district for introducing Ibram X. Kendi's policy theory. Danielle Clymer, 2016. Jody Gunning, 25 years of LASD's 100-year history.
Your time is complete. We will now move on to our consent agenda. Do any board members have items they would like to remove from the consent agenda this evening?
Yes, I have just a question on item, change the, it should be 2H.
Okay, Dr. Dowling has a question on 2H. We will get to your question. Do you have anything you'd like to remove, Dr. Dowling?
Excuse me?
Do you have anything you would like to remove from the consent agenda?
No.
Board Member Clymer, do you have anything you would like to remove?
I do not, thank you.
Board Member Zaidama, do you have anything you would like to remove?
Nope.
Board Member Honak, do you have anything you would like to remove from the consent agenda this evening?
No, nothing. Thank you.
I also do not have anything I would like to remove from the consent agenda. Dr. Dowling, I will open the floor to you for your question on item H.
Okay. The question I have, this is a salary exception for a 4-hour supervisor mechanic. That would be the head mechanic. And we have 2 mechanics or 3? 2 plus the supervisor. I don't have an issue with the exception. I just want to know if the person's getting paid enough. Is this fair pay? I mean, 30 years of experience as a mechanic, as a supervisor. I want to make sure that we don't have any turnover. This is a critical need. In my feeling, this is a critical need. With 2 mechanics plus a supervisor, that's not too many.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's why we did the salary exception.
Okay, the individual, how long has the individual been here?
Oh, goodness. He's been here a long time. I don't know the exact,
Okay. Well, good.
started
good for
as a
them.
mechanic.
I appreciate that. I really do. 20 years. I just want to make sure they're getting enough. They're getting paid appropriately.
Yes,
Okay, that was my only question.
thank you.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I will second. Having a first and a second, I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Since we did not remove any items from the consent agenda, we will move to our agenda item 3B on the original listing, which is approval of the fiscal year 2022 annual financial report, which will be presented by Executive Director Vaughn.
Can you hear me all right? Okay, I know I was a little quiet last time, so I just wanted to confirm. Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning, colleagues and community, thank you for joining me tonight to discuss and approve the district's annual financial report covering fiscal year 2022. Tonight's presentation aligns with the district's strategic plan to increase stakeholder knowledge and understanding of school finance and funding. State statute requires school districts have their annual financial report approved by their governing board and submitted to the Arizona Department of Education and Maricopa County School Superintendent by October 15th. By approving the annual financial report tonight, the district will be able to comply with these requirements. The format of the annual financial report is designed and published each year by the Arizona Auditor General's Office in coordination with the Arizona Department of Education to meet statutory requirements. School districts are required to utilize the published forms. For the remainder of the presentation, I will review spending from select funds, or holistically, we will begin with the Maintenance and Operations Fund. The Maintenance and Operations, or M&O Fund, supports daily operating costs, people, and programs. 84% of all spending in M&O was for salaries and benefits. Another 6% was for purchase services, which can include contractors' employees, as well as services provided by outside firms. Utilities were 4%, and the remainder of the spending was made up of supplies and insurance costs. It's important to note that this fund includes within it the M&O override. For fiscal year 2022, the override was $9.4 million of the M&O budget, and all of the override was spent between salaries and benefits. At our next board meeting, I will be providing a more detailed presentation on the district's override and bond program as part of the annual update to the community. Beyond the financial figures, I'd like to put some of the district's operations into perspective. At the end of last year, the district served over 11,000 students, including preschool students, with 601 teachers and certified staff, 673 classified staff, and 44 administrators. A couple of statistics on the work the team performed last year. Our food service team served 1,622,884 meals and snacks. Our transportation team transported students over 624,000 miles to and from school. Over 6,100 personnel action requests were processed by HR and payroll. Over 6,000 facility work orders were completed by our facilities team. And over 2,900 purchase orders were processed, all in support of the district's programs and students. The Classroom Site Fund was originally created due to a voter-approved sales tax for education in the early 2000s. After 20 years as a voter-approved initiative, the state legislature took action to continue the Classroom Site Fund as opposed to let it expire. The revenue the district receives from the Classroom Site Fund is driven by sales tax the state collects related to the Classroom Site Fund, as well as certain state land trust transactions. The district utilizes the Classroom Site Fund for instructional salaries and benefits, including base pay increases, performance pay for classroom teachers, and instructional aids for schools depending on site enrollment. As a result, 100% of the Classroom Site Fund spending for fiscal year 2022 was on salary and benefits. Current expenditures, as defined by the Auditor General's Office, include expenditures from all funds for elementary and secondary education. They do not include capital, such as land and improvements, furniture and equipment, vehicles, community school operations, such as preschool and extended day programs, or certain facility usage costs. Based on these metrics, the district's instructional spending was 60%, while classroom spending was 73%, including instruction, instructional support, and student support. 10% of the spending goes to facilities maintenance, 4% to transportation, 4% to non-instruction, which is primarily food service operations, and 9% supports administration. The district's capital outlay fund supports purchases that are expected to last more than 1 year and can include items such as textbooks, library books and instructional materials, computers, furniture and equipment, vehicles, and construction. In fiscal year 2022, the capital costs were primarily laptop computers and iReady mathematics. The Adjacent Waste Fund is designed to support improvements adjacent to district properties for purposes of making the district's facilities accessible through items such as sidewalks and roadways, entries and exits. In fiscal year 2022, Adjacent Waste expenditures supported the White Tanks Learning Center construction project. The Debt Service Fund is where the district makes payments, both principal and interest, on voter-approved bond issuance. In fiscal year 2022, the district made principal payments of $6.2 million and interest payments of $1.4 million. The Bond Building Fund is where proceeds from the sale of voter-approved bonds is spent. In fiscal year 2022, the district spent almost $1.7 million of bond proceeds, primarily on White Tanks Learning Center and special education buses. At the next board meeting, I'll be providing a more detailed bond and override annual update for the board and community. The Food Service Fund shows the results of the nutritional program. Shown on the slide, you can see that 40% of spending is on salaries and benefits in food service, 45% is on supplies, including food, and the remaining 15% is other costs. Revenue for the food service program in fiscal year 2022 was primarily driven by federal reimbursement under the National School Lunch Program. The reimbursement rate for meals was raised by USDA temporarily during the pandemic. The Community Education Fund is where the district accounts for activities related to preschool and extended day programs. In fiscal year 2022, the district's preschool program was supported in part by a Department of Economic Security grant, which provided about $900,000 of revenue. Expenses from the Community Education Fund is 93% salaries and benefits. This slide shows the spending in fiscal year 2022 for the district's COVID-19 funds. ESSER 1 was at the very tail end of the program, and so spending was very low. The spending you see there was primarily providing supports required to be provided to private schools within the district with ESSER funds. ESSER 2 supported positions such as teachers and support staff. ESSER 3 spending supported behavior intervention techs, math aides, and tutoring primarily. The childcare grant supported community education, salary and benefits. The Arizona On Track grant supported summer school. The high cost need grant made funding available for certain high cost special education students. The Educate Plus Up grant supported iReady math consumables and Edgenuity during fiscal year 2022. At this time, I'm available to answer any questions you may have on the district's annual financial report for fiscal year 2022.
I will start the questions. Thank you for this report. I understand that the purpose of this report is to report to the state what we actually spent and where we actually were. So my question is really kind of piggybacking off of our conversation from our last meeting, which is to say, when I look at this and I see as a layperson, that we budgeted this just in M&O, let's say, salary and benefits of $66 million, and we only spent $59 million. My question is, why didn't we spend more money? And I know the answer to that, but I'd like to hear a more of an explanation.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to dig into that. So one of the things you'll see when you look at school district budgets is that in the what you would call levy funds, the ones that aren't driven by cash, but more so what legally you're allowed to budget, districts will budget up to the legal maximum. The reason you see districts doing that, at least one of the reasons, is actually related to the expenditure limit at the state level. So if the aggregate expenditure limit were to require cuts, how they would be applied is they calculate a percentage statewide, and every district is expected to reduce their budget by that percentage. One of the benefits to budgeting at the legal maximum is some of that budget cut, if you will, wouldn't be actual planned spending. It would be cutting what your expected carryover would be. Whereas if you budgeted at exactly what you plan to spend, every amount of that cut would be required to be actual spending cut as opposed to just legal budget cut. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. And I think just to add to that, for this year specifically, we had numerous positions that we wanted to fill and that were open and that were budgeted, but we were unable to fill either at the beginning of the year. Some were still open at the middle of the year and some were still open at the end of the year. So in a case that a position goes unfilled for the entire year, that entire amount of that salary and benefits is included in the budgeted amount, but then not included in the expenditure amount. So
sure. If I could expand on that a little bit. So school districts, when they budget for a position, they hold funds as if it's going to be filled the entire year, because you don't want to be in a situation where you've offered a job to an employee, but you don't have budget capacity to pay them for it. But as you pointed out, the reality of the situation is that you do have vacancies during the year. And so you are going to see a difference between budget and actual, both for the AEL reasons and budgeting up to the legal maximum that I previously stated, but also for the difference between planned spending and spending that actually came to fruition in terms of salary savings and vacancies, or we also are having significant issues with supply chain in certain instances where we may have even contracted for some purchasing, but if our vendors can't deliver and get us the product in time, that also causes some differences between budgeted spending and actual spending.
well, I know we ran into some issues with our new White Takes Learning Center facility that has been delayed. And so that would not impact M&O, but would impact the DAA, I believe, and maybe some of the other funds as well. So yeah, I think we've had numerous things from the pandemic that are still impacting our potential spending.
Yes.
Any other board member questions or comments on the presentation?
I had a question.
Or
Go ahead, board member
What-
Honak.
Thank you, Jeremy Honak. There's, it's 601 teachers and certified staff. Was that, somehow the number 508? Was, what was the number, last year of that? Or has that changed dramatically, or has it changed the, what's included in that? It's on
I would
the-
have, sorry.
You go ahead.
Okay, I would have to get back to you on that. I did not pull any further historical information than what I put in the presentation. I will say, when I pulled those numbers for fiscal year 2022, how I did it was I looked at positions that were filled at the end of the year. And so that doesn't consider vacant positions that we planned to have filled to the previous conversation, but actually did not at the end of the year.
I have the same question. It's on slide 6. If we can go to slide 6. The certified staff seems high. Should be fiscal year 22 operational review. It's just before slide 7.
So I will say that that's not, that's funny.
Did you catch that?
I did.
the same
I
one,
will say that that's not just teachers. That's all certified staff that are not administrators.
Oh, okay, that clarifies that. And the, actually, that's not the, yes, it is. And this, that's not the right slide. That's the one. And the classified staff looks light. I thought we had more than that.
Again,
800 or 800.
that's filled positions, and classified staff a lot of times are where you're most likely to have some
Vacancy.
vacancies. So
Okay, that clarifies that. Now, I want, can we have this clarification for the public that 11,209 students, we never had a peak enrollment of 11,000, did we?
no, and so that's not an ADM number.
Okay,
that's
okay,
a-
that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
That was my question. Did we get a aid for 11,200
we did-
in some, either a 0.25 or a 0.5?
No, so that number includes all community education preschool students as well, which the state does not fund. However, we do charge families tuition. I didn't want to exclude students because obviously our team does do a substantial amount of work for all students we serve, whether we are funded through the state for them or not. So that's why I included them. But to your point, no, we are not funded at that level.
Okay, that was my question.
Any other questions or comments? Then I will move to approve the fiscal year 2022 annual financial report as presented.
I second.
Having a first and a second, I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Executive Director Vaughn. The next item on our agenda is second reading and adoption of policy revision BEDB. This will be presented by myself and Superintendent Gunning. I will start us off. So at our last meeting, we did the first read of agenda item or policy BEDB. And the primary purpose of this revision is historically, we have not done as many special meetings that needed action, board action. We've done more special meetings that were study sessions only. And so our policy needed to be revised for what those special meeting agendas look like. So in the current version of the policy, which the board members can see through board docs, I would like to propose 2 options for board consideration. The only difference in both of these options, well, let's see, option 1, there are 3 differences from our regular meeting agenda. The first difference is there is no recognitions. The second difference is there is no presentations. The third difference is there are no reports, meaning superintendent report, board report, administrator reports. The second option contains two differences from our regular meeting. The first difference is no recognitions. The second difference is no reports. So the difference between the two options I would like to propose is the inclusion of a presentations item in the agenda. The presentation item would come toward the beginning of the agenda, which would allow any outside presenters. For example, we usually have an annual report that comes from our insurance company. It would allow them to come, do their presentation, and then potentially leave at that point. If we don't have the presentations as an option, that item would need to remain and be included in either item F or item G on the agenda. I'm happy to go with either of these options. I will also open the floor to additional suggestions or comments. I would like board member feedback, please, on your preference for option 1, 2, or feel free to propose an option 3.
Are we going to go in order? We just,
Fine.
okay. I think I would prefer option B, just to add in the presentations. And we didn't talk about that last time, but adding that in here, we probably wouldn't have them every time during a special meeting, but if it's a possibility, I think it makes sense to add it. And if we don't, it just is, it's a blank spot on our agenda. So I would say option B seems to make more sense.
I have a comment, Jeremy Honak. To restate, the purpose of the basically option A and B adding presentations is just that it gives another opportunity so that they're not all jammed into the general meetings, or is that the idea, just to spread them out, or does it mean we're going to have more presentations?
It does not mean we would have more presentations. It just means that if we had an outside presenter that could go, that person could basically come get their business taken care of in the early part of the meeting and then, go about their business, I suppose. Yeah, and the purpose of the policy itself is to have consistency between what we do in our regular meetings and what we do in our special meetings. Again, historically, we haven't had to have as many special meetings. And just because all of these items are on the agenda does not mean there will be items in them. There could be special meetings that we don't have information and discussion. There could be special meetings that we don't even have a consent agenda on. This is just kind of an all-inclusive scenario so that we're following our own board policy. And if there are items we don't need to include, then that item would be blank on the agenda.
That's clear to me now. Thank you.
You're welcome. So do you have a preference, board member Honak, as to option A or option B, or do you have another suggestion?
For me, I guess based on the information that option B is probably the one, because it doesn't mean there's necessarily going to really be a lot of difference. It just gives the option that if we do need, to do presentation, then rather than elsewhere, it could be done. So mark me down for B.
Great, thank you. Dr. Dowling?
Let me flip my coin here. I'll go with option B.
Okay, thank you. Any additional commentary?
No, can we just make a motion now?
Yes.
I motion to approve. Sorry, make sure I say it correctly. The adoption of policy revision BEDB with option B going forward.
Okay, I will second that. Having a first and a second, I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Our next item is the approval of revision to superintendent evaluation instrument. This will also be presented by myself and Superintendent Gunning. This is, I believe, our fourth or fifth discussion regarding the evaluation tool, but as stated previously, the evaluation instrument is a very important piece of our job. So one of the primary roles of the board is to evaluate the superintendent. The only items that have changed from the previous conversation that we had, and the items that I would like us to focus on, because they are the items that changed, are highlighted in yellow on the attachment that you received. And I want to just go through briefly a high-level overview of what those changes are and what they look like. So we have 4 different comparisons, let's say, that we're doing to other districts and state scores. And then we have some comparisons that we're doing to our own selves for our own growth. And so there is some consistency that now has been applied to this. So for example, if you look at option or performance indicator 2.4.1 for ELA, which is our English language arts, our district AASA, which is our standard test scores for grades 3 through 5, will exceed the state average AASA scores by 11 points or more in the using the spring of 2023 data. In spring of 2022, we exceeded the state average by 9 points. So yes, we are comparing ourselves to the state, but we are adding a percentage based on where we have been in the past compared to the state and where we would like to get closer to being compared to the state. So that's what you're going to see for the first 2 for math and ELA, or for math and ELA. We're going to see basically that we're going to exceed where we were in the spring of 2022 by 2 additional percentage points when it comes to proficiency. Is that relatively clear? Okay. The next section, we're going to compare ourselves to our peers, and we want to meet or exceed the peer average state standard scores. And in this case, we don't get the detailed information for the district level state scores until the fall. So we can't have those scores in the spring to be able to do that as a term B rating. So we're going to use the current year, which is spring 2022 data for that particular piece of information when we compare to our peers. When we compare for our own growth and we compare to the state, we will use the spring 2023 data, which will be available in term B. The second or the third comparison that we do is we want to meet or exceed our West Valley District average standardized test scores. That would be an example in 2.4.5 and 2.4.6. In 2.4.9, that's where we are saying how much we want to exceed really where we want our proficiency scores to be. So in spring of 2022, for example, we were 50% proficient in ELA for grades 3 through 5. We want to increase that to 54% proficient. In this section of the percentage growth on the proficiency, we're increasing all of those by 4%. The last comparison that we're doing is our own growth on our benchmark scores. So what we're doing is expecting a 20% growth from our fall proficiency benchmark scores to our spring proficiency benchmark scores. So for example, in 2.4.11, we're saying we want to meet or exceed 62% proficient for grades 3 through 5 benchmark scores in spring of 2023. And in fall of 2022, we were at 52% proficient, which is a 20% growth. So part of the evaluation will be whether it's term A or term B, we will be provided with the actual data to be able to say, yes, we passed this goal. No, we did not pass this goal. So all of those are going to be based in data that are provided. There are a couple of other areas that have changes as well, but I'd like to address any questions or if there's anything that you would like for Superintendent Gunning to address specifically related to the benchmark and state standard testing data and goals.
Jeremy Honak, I've got a couple of questions.
Yes, go ahead.
I know we're talking about the yellow, but one thing that is, maybe I missed it earlier, but up at the top of page, oh boy, I don't know which one it is. The one that says Part 2 Strategic Plan. There's orange in there that says the board will review compiled scores and determine final submission for each standard by consensus. That's really odious. In my opinion, because what it says is that, let's say that Dr. Dennis Dowling is really focused on academics, and he rates the scores that may be the fact that we're not doing well in the academics. But then say, the rest of the board, Clymer, Zeidema, Kim Moran, rate things with more of an overall mind of how it's doing with social emotional learning, and rate it high. So now what's going to happen when this is all put together this change by consensus, that the majority are going to be the people that think it's great because she's doing a great job on social emotional learning. And Dr. Dowling, who, I agree with, at least in terms of educational things, his vote isn't going to count, because it's not going to be averaged into the score, because instead they're going to take the compiled scores and determine not average them all together as it was done, but change it. So now it's just a standard by consensus. I think that's undemocratic. It's totally eliminating a minority voice. And the other thing that I have as a question is that, well, I have two more, I'm sorry. In this section with the bench, comparing, from spring to fall and year to year, it's averaging together grades 6 to 8. And I don't think that's good or correct, because I've made this illustration over and over. In the end, our graduates are actually 8th graders, and they go to high school either knowing things or not knowing them. To me, that's really the only score that's correct from the standpoint of results of how the school is doing. I'm not saying it doesn't count. You got to look at what every grade is doing, because there are development things going along, but to rate our school based upon averaging 6 to 8 isn't really fair, because 6 and 7 are really relatively high compared to 8. I don't know what's going on, why 8th grade is going down, but it shouldn't. If anything, it should be going up. Kids are getting more mature. And so to me, the 8th grade really deserves a whole line by itself, because it is probably, to me, it's the most important thing. That's why the elementary school is there, to prepare kids for high school. The third question that I have is, and I don't know this for a fact, but people have been telling me that with the benchmarks, the test that's given at the beginning of the year, some point, has the identical same questions as the benchmark test given in near the end of the year in the spring. Maybe I'm 100% wrong, but I've heard this from numerous people. Well, that's kind of not very, if that's true, that's kind of nonsense, because all the teachers got to do is make sure those kids know those answers. And if they can't improve those answers, and in other words, anybody could improve those answers, and not a sign really that kids are learning a lot more. So I'm not sure anybody has, anyway, those are my 3 issues right here. So I'll give the floor over.
Superintendent Gunning, would you like to address the third issue on the benchmark testing?
Our fall and spring assessments, I would have to double check with Gina, but I think they've always been the same. They were the same tests that we give in the fall that we do in the spring. So it's to show and to measure your growth for the end of the year, of where you're expected to be by the end of the year. But we haven't had any issues ever, and we've been doing this for years. So,
And the benchmarks are based on the standards, and the standards are very well known, correct?
correct.
So we're not trying to
Correct.
trick students, or we're
No.
trying to make sure that they understand the standards. And so that's what we're asking them at the beginning of the year to know how far they are in knowing that, and then asking it at the end of the year to find out how much more they've learned throughout the year.
Correct.
Can I say something?
Whoa,
about-
wait a,
It just happens to be something that I know a little bit about, but your district-wide assessment, we normally they're called criterion reference test because it's based on a criteria within the district, not like within the school of the state of Arizona versus a national norm reference test that would be nationwide norms. But anyway, you would always have a pre and a post test that would be the same. Why? Is because you're going to compare apples to apples, number one. Number two, particularly in math, you're in the pre-test, they're going to be exposed to questions about concepts that they haven't learned. So you'll see a lot of blank responses. They just don't know. And if they understand how to take a test, you go on and you skip the one that you don't know, you go to the next one, and then you go back to the ones that you haven't marked yet. And then you'll find there's a large number of unmarked answers because of the fact they haven't been exposed to that yet. So I have no issues to that. And I would assume that the tests are given out and then they're brought back into the district and secured until the spring, and then they're given
Correct.
back out.
They're online.
Yeah.
So,
wait, okay, hold on a second here. If an SAT is a standardized test, two people going and taking us, when they give us SAT on a date, it's got a set of questions. The next day, there are completely different questions if other people take it. If not, everybody would know what all the questions are, would pass it on. It would be that simple. So to say that they're the same, they should be the same, is absurd. Nobody does that. No standardized test does that. In this case, I'm talking about where the question number 11 is going to be 3 plus 3, and the answer is supposed to be 6. If that same question, 3 plus 3, and the answer, C is 6 or whatever, is on from fall to the spring, that's not the way standardized tests work. And that
This
is
a
not
standardized test, Jeremy. This is not a standardized test. This is a criterion reference test. Asking students to know and understand and do based on our state standards, not national standards, which would be a standardized test across the nation.
But Dr. Dowling, if the question stays the same, let's say it's more complicated, it's not an intuitive answer. If the question stays the same, the teacher doesn't have to teach the student the concept to know how to do it. They simply have to have them remember the answers from the previous one. So either I'm 100% misunderstanding or but I've had a lot of people tell me this is kind of outrageous because it really is not a measure whether students learned anything. It's a measure of whether students memorize by rote, by having that same problem with the same answer repeated over and over during the year.
the questions are also in different random orders. So even like if Michael and I were taking the question, our questions would be in different order.
Okay, if that's the case, then that's okay. And I mean, if they have, 8 different questions for question number 14 and they randomly rotate them around, then that would be a correct way of doing it. That wasn't what maybe I misunderstood. Anyway, so I'll drop that point. But my other 2 points, I still think are important, that 8th grade should be broken out at least. And that beginning thing is reprehensible. It just, from my standpoint, it's like, it's not even worth filling out the sheet if I know mine's not going to be averaged in. It's just going to be thrown in the trash because the majority votes to ignore it. So I yield the floor again. Thank you.
Board Member Seidemann?
To address your point about the eighth graders, I agree. Our eighth graders, we definitely need to bump their scores up. And I think that we're doing the best we can. Our district is doing everything we can. We're throwing money, people, everything that we can possibly throw at improving our scores for all our kids, and our eighth graders are included in that. We talked at length about this specific thing of breaking it out, because in the past it was just overall third through eighth grade. And we discussed how it was important to break out our middle school versus our elementary school, because there's such a difference in those scores, that we wanted to make sure that we were accurately looking at what was happening. So that discussion happened many times with this board. And so I appreciate your feedback, Mr. Honak, but I don't agree, because we've already talked about this a bunch of times. And I think that we are always improving this tool that we use to do our review. And I think that we have done a good job of coming up with what we've come up with now. As to your other point about our scores being compiled and being done by consensus, that's kind of generally how it's always been done, to be honest. We get the average of the scores, but then we always talk about it as a group, and we always come to an agreement. And sometimes in those discussions, people will be like, yeah, actually, I want to rate it lower, or yeah, I want to rate it higher. And so there's always that conversation, which is the point of us doing it ahead of time and then coming together and talking about it as a group. So I think this is just putting in writing what's already being done.
Okay, well, the thing that bothered me was seeing it in red, because consensus can be in our board. We've had consensuses where the consensus of the majority has what the definition of consensus is. What you just described is correct. What I understand, that we all do our scores ahead of time, then we get together and and a lot of people change their minds, but that's not a consensus. That's our having a discussion about it, and people freely, changing their essentially their vote, their mind, and then that being averaged together. So it isn't really a consensus. We have a discussion, and during those discussions, some people say, yeah, I'm going to change it. And other people go, no, I'm not going to change it, or I'm going to change it the other way, or whatever. And that's the way it should be. So this change here should be stricken, the orange thing, because it can be interpreted to mean that who are the majority that agree that way. And we've also had discussions on other things where that's been clearly the case. If three people really feel one way and the other two feel something different, it's gone down as the consensus being the people, and the outliers are ignored. So I don't know why we're adding it right now. If it already worked before, as you just described, and I agree, then why don't we just leave it there and take out this orange line, which could it's just something to create more drama and cause trouble. You're trying to do something that isn't broken.
Okay, I'll add some commentary to that. So this is a board of 5 people. The way that this board works is a majority rule. That's how it is. If 3 out of 5 agree on something, that then becomes potentially board policy, that then becomes potentially the superintendent's evaluation. And that is how this governing body is set up. So averaging the scores so that someone's artificially low or artificially high scores are averaged into the number does not accurately represent the majority of this board. So consensus is majority. Consensus is not a unanimous agreement. And that is the way that this governing board governs.
Well, that's the way that you would like it to be governed. And that's
That is
not
reality,
democracy.
Mr. Honak.
Wait a minute. You finished and I'm talking now. Okay. And when you do job reviews and people do, in a lot of organizations, they do reviews and they have different people, they do average it, and we have averaged it. And up till now, what you're saying, Kim Moran, is incorrect. It is not It does not comport with Ms. Zaidama said a minute ago. It does not comport with what we have been doing. We sit in there and, you know, everybody puts it together. It's all averaged. Someone reads what the averages are. And then we talk about the individual points, and people change their points, and then it's averaged again. And that's what we have come to agree on. So that is incorrect, Kim Moran, that it's a majority. It is not. That's not the way it's been. I've been through several of these reviews, and it's always been the way that I stated just now and the way that Melissa Zaidama just stated a moment ago, unless she decides to change her mind. It's not a majority. We discuss it, we come together, everybody's got their point of view, and it's very democratic and very surprising. I'm very surprised sometimes. I change my number to something I didn't expect, and other people change things to the numbers that I never expected they did. And that's the way it should be working. It's not just the majority says this and we don't average it. We've always averaged it.
As we stated, you're more than welcome to score whatever you would like to score, but according to how this is written and what I would like to see passed is that the consensus of the board becomes what the final scores are. I would like to hear from any of the other board members that have any commentary on this particular topic.
So the issue, what I think I'm hearing is that majority versus consensus. Is that what we're?
No, you're saying unanimous versus consensus. Consensus does not mean unanimous. So majority is consensus.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get clarified here.
That's a definition that Kim Moran is trying to put into it. Consensus doesn't mean majority rule. It does not. The problem with democracy, we've had this discussion before, and why the Greeks figured out, 2000 years ago, 3000, whatever, that it didn't work, is you can have 51 people decide to murder and steal everything of the other 49 people. It doesn't work. We're a republic in this country, and it doesn't work doing that. And consensus is only defined as majority in Kim Moran's mind. Okay. And it's the same mind that has brought us a lot of trouble. It does not mean it. And first off, the consensus can be defined in 23 different ways. And I'm just simply saying, well, if you're going to say it up there, then give it a definition. But right now, it's a definition that the board president can decide on the fly whatever she wants. Maybe it comes to something where she's in the minority, and all of a sudden, the consensus is supposed to be average. So why are we changing something that already worked? I'll tell you why.
It did not work.
Because Kim Moran wants to rule out the minority, as she always does. You're talking over me. Okay.
Unfair scores. It did not work. The system that we had last year, in my opinion, did not work.
You know what? It worked, in my opinion, because I don't think Superintendent Gunning deserved any bonus, and she got about a $7,000 or $8,000 bonus, because I don't know why, when 2/3 of our kids are failing math going to.
We're getting off topic at this point, Mr. Honak.
No, we're not. We're
We've heard
talking
your
about her
opinion
getting a
on that.
bonus.
Let's go ahead and talk about the other revisions to the evaluation tool. If we look under standard 4, we updated the evaluation metrics for the one-to-one devices to specifically state that all students would be utilizing one-to-one devices 2 or more times per week, as evidenced by logins. I would expect that number of 2 or more times per week to go up as we get more experience and use the technology more, but that's kind of a starting point in year 1 of our one-to-one rollout. Item 2.4.28, demonstrate consistent participation in professional development by certified staff, as evidenced by a participation rate of 95% or higher in all offerings. And 2.4.29, demonstrate support of priority initiatives in professional development by certified staff, as evidenced by 80% of hours offered in math curriculum, ELA curriculum, cooperative learning, mental health, behavior support, and technology. Those are our primary initiatives that we want to make sure that our teachers and staff, our teachers in this case, if we're talking about certified staff, are concentrating the majority of their PD hours in. Any questions on those specific measurements? Okay, and those are all of the changes that are proposed. Again, the majority is in the benchmark and state standard test data, and then the technology and PD items as well. As I believe most of you know, there are some potential changes happening to our student survey under the new laws that went into effect on the 24th. If we need to change any of the metrics in here or eliminate a question because it no longer is on our survey, we will update that when we know more about that. Those surveys are always done in term B.
I have a question just
Go ahead.
on 2.4.1 and 2.4.2. You refer, or we refer to exceed state on 2.4.1, exceed state average scores by 11 points from spring to spring. Exceed it by 9 points, the same thing basically for 2.42. Then we go down to the bottom and we switch from percentage point increases to percent increases. It's two different things.
Yes.
That's two different things, and it can be perceived differently. One could look better than the other when in reality, it's not. So I think we should be either percentage point increase or percentage increase. I prefer the percentage point increase.
Well, we are stating the percentage point increase. We're just doing it based on a kind of a different methodology there. So 2.4.11, we're saying the way we got to 62% proficiency, which is a 10-point increase from 52% proficiency, is we are assuming, or we are aiming for, a 20% growth.
Yeah, but the point is we should be one way or the other. It's either we spell it out as a percentage point increase or a percentage increase.
The 20% growth is just to say how we came up with the number. So you're saying you don't want to see the 20% growth on there. You just want to see what the percentages are. I'm trying to provide as much clarity as possible with how we came up with what those percentages should be.
I'm open to discussion on this, but it should be consistent, whereas the first two were percentage point increases. And then we move to percentage increases towards the end here on proficiency, 49%.
So, okay, so I guess I'm not understanding. Is there another way you can say that?
Yeah, we can either say, either convert the 2.4.1, that 11-point increase, to a percentage, or go down to the ones in which we refer to percentage increases and convert those to percentage point increases, one way or the other.
Okay, so for example, if you look at 2.4.11, the point increase is there. We're saying we were at 52, we want to be at 62, so that's a 10-point increase. That 10-point increase is based on 20% growth.
Yeah, understood, but say it the same way for each one of them. Either convert the top two to a percentage increase, and then everything else is aligned to percentage increases. If not.
So you're saying you just want it to be consistent on all of the items. You
Yeah.
don't want to jump around between the two different things.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. I think it's confusing. My preference would be percentage point increases versus percentage increases.
So you would like to remove the 20% growth and just say 10% and 10-point increase.
10 percentage point increase.
Okay, it's going to be different based on each one because again, the mindset or the thought process is 20% growth. Yeah, as a numbers person, I find it more confusing, but I'd like to hear some more other board member feedback on that.
Can we just have them both? Could we just have 10 points, right? I mean, just as it's listed above, increase the score by 10 points and then have 20% growth, meaning that's how we got to that 10-point number. So 20% growth is the overall goal. 10 percentage points would be the outcome of that. I'm fine with consistency. I think that makes sense, but I mean, that way you have the numbers there that explain how we got to that, but just list the 10 points. Basically the difference between the two numbers that are shown there.
Sure. Yes, we can do that.
I think it looks like it's only 11 and 12. Is that right? It's only 11 and 12.
Yeah,
2.4 point, 11 and 12. All the other ones were
11 and 12 and 22 and 23 and 24, but
yes, I'm sorry.
no problem.
You're right.
Okay, so for 11, 12, 23, and 24, we're going to add verbiage to outline the percentage point increase. And I'm happy to take off the 20% growth comment, but I think we're going to come back in December and say, how did we come up with that? How did we come up with that difference? We're going to say, oh yeah, it was 20% growth. So I like having more information rather than less information available. So I'm happy to add additional commentary to those 4 items. Any other questions or comments? No. Then I will entertain a motion.
I will move for approval of revision to the superintendent evaluation instrument with the changes suggested by Dr. Dowling.
I second.
Having a first and a second, I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I vote nay, opposed to it, negative, and against it.
Motion carries. We will now move on to agenda item 4A, discussion of certified staff early contract release process. This will be presented by Director Reichs and Superintendent Gunning.
Hi, good evening. Madam President, members of the governing board. Sorry. Thank you. Oops, did I write on? Superintendent Gunning, colleagues, and community, thank you for joining me tonight to discuss the topic of certified staff early contract releases. I am Leanne Reichs, Director of Human Resources, and Superintendent Gunning will also provide or may provide comment during this presentation. Tonight's presentation is to respond to the request by the governing board to discuss this topic. Some historical information. Here on the slide, we're referring to the current contract language contained in district certified contracts regarding teacher resignations. The contracts state that it will be deemed an unprofessional act should a teacher resign without advanced governing board approval. On this slide, I'm referencing the ARS 15545 that is referenced in the contract under the language I just shown. And so I'd like to just briefly talk about our procedure. So once a certified staff member submits their resignation, Human Resources makes contact to inquire about the reason. If the employee states that a personal or family medical reason is the reason for the resignation, we offer the option for a leave of absence or other supports to assist. I will share that this option generally is not pursued by the staff member, at least in my experience so far. Human Resources will then send a template email stating the reasons the superintendent may consider a request for an early contract release. Those reasons are medical, so for family or for self, family relocations, or for promotions outside the district. Human Resources then gathers relevant documentation for Superintendent Gunning's review. Examples might include a doctor's note, an offer letter, or relocation paperwork. Superintendent then determines if the recommendation will move forward to the governing board for review. So I wanted to share some comparisons by school year, reasons for contract releases that we've had. So you'll notice on column for the year 21-22, we had 12 contract release requests that were brought forward to the board. This school year so far, we've had 13, but I want to make sure to note that number does not include the 2 that were in the consent agenda today. So we've got a total of 15. The top reason for requests are typically for family or employee health reasons. So couple of points or options for discussion, if I may. One option may be to file unprofessional conduct reports to the ADE for any certified staff member that leaves their post prior to governing board approval. If I could add just a little subnote here, I would encourage, from an HR perspective, to consider an exception for extenuating circumstances. Another option to consider is to add liquidated damages to future employment contracts. I will share that some of our surrounding districts have this clause, typically around an average of $2,000 is their damages, but they do have exceptions, right? Exceptions for medical, those types of things. If I may share some concerns about adding this clause, will it be applied fairly and consistency? One would argue when you start having exceptions, right? Does that make it fair and consistent? I also wonder, will it be a barrier to current staff who have been consistent and connected to the district? Will it be a barrier for them returning, signing their agreements next year to see that new clause? And then lastly, one could argue that it gives staff a fairly easy option to get out of their contracts in a climate right now that is challenging and highly competitive for teachers, staff. So at this time, we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Reichs. I will open the floor to any board member questions.
Jeremy
have a
Honak, I got a
question.
question.
Go ahead, Mr. Honak.
Thank you. Yes, I have a question. So if I got it right, the entire last year we had 12 leave, and so far this year, which I don't know whether 3 months in or whatever, 2 months in, we've had 17 leave. And does anybody know how many teachers left because they had to watch a video about implicit bias?
I believe the number so far this year, Mr. Honak, is 15, not 17.
She said 17 because there were 2 in the consent agenda, if
15.
I'd heard correctly.
It was 13 plus 2 would be 15.
Okay, so I'll amend my statement. There were 12 for the entire last year, and we have 15 so far in like approximately the first 2 months of this year. So there's a dramatic increase, and I was wondering if it had to do with policies like forcing teachers to watch a movie about implicit bias.
Is that a policy that we have, Superintendent Gunning?
There's no policy about implicit bias, nor was there a movie.
Thank you for the clarification.
A
I have a
training or
question.
something, a training thing.
No training either. Not really.
No one in the administration seems to be aware of what you were referring to, Board Member Honak. Board Member Clymer, you have the floor.
On slide 7, you list the number, the reasons and the numbers. I want to kind of go to the last school year, 21-22. When I initially brought this up a meeting or two ago, when we had this conversation, to start this conversation, I went back just through our board docs and added up all of the people that had contract release that we were asked in this year. I went through and listed every single person's name and the date that they were released, and my number was 27. So there's a discrepancy on what we approved last year and what I'm seeing here. That's half as much roughly. So I want to clear that up first of all. Like, how did we get only half of them reported, and or were the ones reported in board docs different than what you're reporting here? I'm not sure because I can't see dates or anything like that specifically. So I'm happy to share this list with you. I literally just went back to board docs from every month from the time that contracts were released in that year to the time that, we in May when they would have been, done with their contract or whatever.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Leanne. I thought originally you ran those numbers, the 21-22 were up till that time frame, so that you're comparing kind of last year at this time frame, how many people had resigned, had been asked for contract releases, which was, I forget what that total number was, versus 22-23, not the whole year.
Right, that's correct. I was comparing time frame to time frame.
So it's only through September of 21-22.
Yes, I believe that's correct. I mean, we can, I'm happy to look at the lists if you like. And I
Sure.
could
I'm
take a
just,
look at
up
that.
here it says 21-22. And then on the right-hand side, it says 22-23 as of September 13th. So it seemed like we were comparing the whole year to just the 2 months. So that's why I was asking that. I think it still illustrates the point that we're going in the wrong direction, right? If we're comparing apples to apples, we're still moving in the wrong direction in terms of people leaving their contract or abandoning their jobs or what have you. So anyway, I would like to at least make sure that we're counting them the same way in the future. But thank you for clarifying that, because I didn't understand how I was so off.
Okay, so I think the primary reason that this has been brought up for discussion is because we did have 20 plus people in the prior school year who were released from their contracts. And I'm not sure how many of those were actually referred to ADE, but I would say 1 or 2, maybe. And so what happens is, we are understanding and sympathetic that things happen, health issues come up, and there definitely are reasons that are completely justifiable for someone to ask for a release of contract. What seems to be the trend is that there are people who are leaving, and when an employee leaves, there is a cost that comes along with that. There is a cost for, in this case, for certified teachers, a substitute teacher who might be required to fill their classroom, training for a new teacher that might come in to replace them. And for those people who are leaving, and I don't have a great definition of who should be in what bucket versus the other bucket, but trying to recoup some of those real costs that we have to incur as a district makes sense for someone who breaches a contract. I know for other types of employers who have contracted employees, breaching a contract does come with an actual cost. So that makes sense to me that would be something that we would consider, but I'm happy to hear what other board members think about that as well.
I agree. What is the cost to replace a certified employee approximately?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The ASPAA, the Arizona School Personnel Association, recently did a survey, and they estimated it around $20,000 That's some soft costs. There's
Sure.
some hard, what all that includes, but approximately.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons that one of Superintendent Gunning's goals has always been based on teacher retention, because we know that that's an expensive prospect when that number is high. Not only is it expensive in actual costs, but also for our school culture, our students, all those kind of soft costs as well.
So I'm going to speak as a parent for a moment up here in that I've had the kid that has the teacher that leaves in the middle. We've had to deal with it. Multiple kids have had to deal with it in multiple schools and multiple situations. I was notified today that it's happening again at another school. So a person that's not even on our list. So that's going to make this 16 now instead of 15. And it's the cost that the district is paying. It's the cost to these students. It's what it's taking away from these kids and their learning to be in that disruptive environment of losing their teacher, having a sub, if that sub stays, if they're switching subs until they get a new teacher, and then who we're getting in as the new teacher to replace the teacher that's left in the middle of the year is not necessarily going to be who we would pick potentially at when we're picking teachers in March, April, May time, right? So we have got to figure something out because this is too hard on our kids. And we have to do something that makes this not so easy for people to leave. And I am super sympathetic to things come up and things happen, but I also am thinking about these kids, which is my top priority up here, is what are we doing to make things better for these kids every day? And teachers leaving in the middle of the year is not what is best for them. So we have to figure out how to make this not happen as much.
I've got a comment on here. I lean towards liquidated damages. I'll let you know right now. But what I don't understand, liquidated damages would be for me, things that would be reported to ADE, for example. And I'm sorry, but promotion's not getting it. If they sign a contract with us, they want to be in our classroom. We expect them to be in the classroom for the entire contract period. Sorry about that. A lot of promotions you can get in the spring. And so we can fill that position instead of doing what Melissa just mentioned. That's terrible. I walked in as a substitute in Dysart. I walked into a class and no one told me that this is the third week of school. I think it was a fourth grade class, and no one told me the teacher walked out 2 days before. Now, classroom management is usually my skill, but not in this case. There was control in that classroom. The kids had it. So try to get it back. And I tried for 2 days. I told the principal, bye. But that being said, in other school districts, I think we need more research on this. Do they ask for liquidated damages for all these reasons here for every single one? Or is it just for those that would be reported change in career, something they just basically walk out?
So I do know that the other districts that I've talked to, they do have exceptions. So for those reasons that we have listed. So for medical, for sure, they probably vary on the other ones. There probably would be more information there, but again, that's our top reason often that our certified staff leave is for medical reasons.
Well,
I would
think-
like to,
Oh, go ahead.
Jeremy Honak, could make a quick comment about the implicit bias. I guarantee it happened. It was in a training, was discrimination in the workplace. And within that training, I didn't see it, but I'm virtually certain that that's what it had, because I had numerous reports of that. Teachers for some reason want to report things and tell me about them. So I'm not making it up.
Okay. In terms of the medical, I agree with Dr. Dowling that, there's going to be some reasons that you wouldn't have this on folks that are leaving for medical reasons. But I do agree with the promotion aspect of it. Yes, I understand that some jobs fall in your lap, but you also shouldn't be looking for a job when you're contracted for another one. And I also know that happens too. So, and that's the reason that they don't want to take a leave of absence, is because they can't go and work someplace else. I mean, we all have jobs. We all get how it works. So I want to be respectful of people that want to change careers and want to be in a different place and don't want to be in the classroom for whatever reason. You know, we only want, you know, the best of the best in our classrooms, but I think the purpose of this to me is not necessarily to be punitive to people that are having, you know, whether it's a personal or family medical issue or something like that. It's to remind the rest of people that are leaving that you signed a contract and you have a responsibility, not only your employer, but the 30-something kids that are in your classroom. And if, you know, if you said the damages roughly just on average, if they're $2,000 or $2,500, I mean, that's 10% of the cost that it costs us to replace you. That's nothing. If you get a promotion, that's, you know, that's probably not even what you're leaving the district for. So I think that the amount isn't going to necessarily stop everyone, but I think we also need to realize that we're in a teacher shortage and we need everybody, all hands on deck here. And we've got to figure out how to get people to live up to their commitment, if at all possible. So I would be, I would be in the camp, as Dr. Dowling mentioned, for liquidated damages with the caveat for medical and in some of those special circumstances. I do, however, think, and I know we have done this in the past, so I don't think we close this door altogether, but I do think we need to report teachers that abandon their jobs and leave for unprofessional conduct. I'm not saying that, you know, if it's medical or whatever, and you can't wait until your contract is actually released and by the governing board, et cetera, I understand that. But just not showing up again, they know when they sign these documents that this is what this is for. So unless there's extenuating circumstances, I don't understand. I mean, we meet 2 or 3 times a month. So it's not as though we're holding them for months at a time. So I do think there's going to be some circumstances where I would still be in favor of submitting those names for unprofessional conduct, because just, you know, walking out on a Thursday afternoon and not coming back is not only inappropriate, it's just, you know, devastating to the kids that are in that classroom. And I think they should be held accountable for that.
I agree on accountability and it should be done, but in a way we're sort of saying the beatings will continue until morale improves. When Steve Watson did a survey of all the teachers, I think everybody was in shock, and he sent the letter out to everybody that, you know, 70–80% of teachers are like in total panic and stress levels up to, you know, the top of the chart, because they have so much put on their plate beyond teaching. They decided they wanted to go teaching, and they want to be with children and teach them. And instead they're spending all their time, or a large part of their time, doing all these other things, conscious discipline and training this and training that and whatever. And the point I was just trying to make is I thought we learned a lesson on that, but we're not. We haven't. We're still doing that stuff. So that's got to be, that's the elephant in the room of why you need to make teachers happy, and then you don't have a problem with them leaving. And yes, some people are going to leave for medical reasons, but as Daniel Clymer just said, you know, you've got people that are leaving for other reasons. And we're not a stepping stool here so that people can go get a promotion. We're a school. We should hire people that, you know, we're entitled to people that want to sincerely come and work here, not just sort of, you know, be here so they can add something to the resume and then move on in the middle of the year, just leave us in the lurch. So I agree with all of that, but I think we have a culture that we are, however you figure the numbers, teachers are leaving at a greater rate than they were before. And Steve Watson gave us some very valuable information why, and I don't think we're using that information at all.
Okay, so I would also agree with the liquidated damages as a route to go. I know one of the things that we plan to do is look at teacher contracts already this fall. So I think I would believe that's the consensus. Board Representative, do you have any opinion on that? I'm good with that. Okay, so it sounds like there's a consensus for liquidated damages. If we could do some more research to find out what our peer users might include in their contracts. That doesn't mean we're going to follow what they're doing, but my guidance kind of what the industry standards are. I think $2,000 is low, but that's what I want as much of our costs as possible. Of course, we got on that. So Superintendent Gunning, do you have anything else to add?
No, that was what I was going to say, is that we'll take this information to provide to our attorney when she comes back to the presentation regarding the contract. We'll do a little more research, because one of the things that I know is when you do liquidated damages, they can just buy out regardless of whatever reason. So, and we're also seeing that from private industry and also the charter industry, they're paying those damages for them. So they're just walking. So a lot of districts that have done it are choosing to rethink that, because it's not as effective. They're actually seeing a higher exit rating than the other districts. But I think it'll be important to discuss it, look at the contract language and look at those pieces. So when she was talking about exceptions, it would be exceptions to not have to pay the liquidated damages is what they were, looking at. So
I had a question on that. So you said, other districts are choosing not to do it because they're realizing that people are just taking sort of that out, or just saying, okay, I paid $2,000 and leave. But kind of flipping that on its head, I mean, people can basically leave now for any reason. They can just say, I have personal reason. I can't work here. I'm getting a promotion. I'm making it all more somebody else. So really they were going to leave anyway, right? Now they have someone else that's going to buy them out, or they have someone else that's whether it's a charter school or private industry or whatever, that's helping them do that. But in a sense, we don't have any mechanism now that stops them from doing that, right?
well, we haven't, like when it was promotion, most of those promotions that we brought to you were over $10,000 increase in their compensation.
But I mean, do we have
So-
a policy that says it has to be a certain amount? Or how do you judge that? currently?
We look to see if the title of the position and then the dollar amount, that it's a substantial dollar amount before we bring it to you. So it's not like, oh, it's $500 more or something like that, but it's a substantial amount. And then the ones that we did report were ones that were inappropriate and unprofessional. The other ones all brought in documentation. So they have to submit doctors' documentation either for their family and or themselves. So I don't know if that would be, I think that's the exact same thing. That it's not like we're just saying, oh yeah, you can just walk out without any documentation. All you have to do is report that it's health related. They have to show that there is truly health related for that. So, and then, yeah, I definitely would love to talk through more about the promotion component and clarity, because there are times, just like right now, we're having a person exit out of their contract and have done so just recently to exit out of their contract to come over here for a promotion. So, and talking through like, what does that mean? And so I think talking as a board to have clarity on that will be helpful as well.
Agree. I look forward to continued conversation on this topic. Thank you, Director Rex. Next item on our agenda is an update on the Superintendent Goal 2.7.3 to complete analysis for one system by June 2023, conscious discipline. This will be presented by Superintendent Gunning.
Yes, this should be pretty short. We just wanted to bring this back to you to provide you an update. This was the one area that we were going to do the evaluation on for this year. After really discussing it as a leadership team and really talking through it, and because this would be our first system to evaluate and that we do not necessarily have that expertise, we wanted to let you know that we are going to work with finding an outside vendor to actually do the evaluation. One, because then we can learn from them and their expertise in conducting such an evaluation. And two, then we can also make sure there's no internal biases as we're looking at a program that has been in place for several years. So that was just an update for you. We have not selected a vendor just yet, so we're trying to find vendors right now.
Okay, and regardless of hiring an outside consultant to do the implementation or the system evaluation, we still expect that would be completed on or before June of 2023.
That is our hope. We'll definitely get their recommendation when they look at whatever the scope and sequence from that. Since we haven't done one before, I'm not sure the timeline regarding that. So, but that's the goal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Honak.
Yes, well, really, the question that came up with conscious discipline, I don't know how first off, you can't hire a company that's a conscious discipline company because they're already bought into conscious discipline. So they're going to find out everything that it did that's positive.
Agreed.
We need, but I think as a board, we need to specify some criteria, not just say, go out and hire somebody. I think the most important criteria is, if you take the parents' survey priorities, is academics. And this question was brought up by, I'm not sure who brought it up, but they brought it up in the context that conscious discipline and the leader of conscious discipline promised or sort of guaranteed that it would improve, make academics go up. And so I think that is the question, because obviously academics haven't gone up, they've gone down pretty much from the time that Superintendent Gunning has been superintendent, and Kim Moran's been on the board, and other members on the board, and conscious discipline has been implemented. If you go from the beginning to where it is now, they've gone down. So the question is what do we really need to go look at beyond academics, that we already can look at our own scores and compare them with, going back 4 or 5 years or whatever. So I question the point of this, other than to just sort of have some professionals come in and give a fancy show to kind of distract from the simple truth of the academics. Why do we need a company come in and say, what were our academics before we started conscious discipline, and how have they progressed along with conscious discipline? And I think right now it's obvious that it hasn't improved one bit. It's maybe hurt. So I don't think discipline is, their values are conscious discipline, but I don't think discipline is any better based on the reports we're getting. So it sounds like Kim Moran agrees that shouldn't be a conscious discipline, but I'm not sure we just sort of set Superintendent Gunning loose to go hire somebody that in their opinion comes up with what's important. We're the board. We should determine what's important. And if we think, that certainly suggestions from a company, but I don't think we should authorize that study until we know exactly what they're going to provide.
So once again, Mr. Honak, we discussed this many times of having system analysis in our district, and how it's very important to us to make sure that the systems and the programs that we have in place are in fact doing what we expect them to do. One of the things we talked about is how conscious discipline is a topic that's come up a lot, and we have heard a lot of feedback, both good and bad. And so we all kind of agreed that it was a great program to start with for Superintendent Gunning to evaluate this year and see if conscious discipline is in fact meeting the goals that they are hoping as a district. So that is why she's been moving forward with this. It's not my understanding that you're hiring a conscious discipline company to evaluate conscious discipline, correct?
Correct. It would be a vendor that's what they do, is evaluate programs.
So
Like
because
systems.
it's not our area of expertise, they are looking to reach out to other people who are experts in this area and have them help them to evaluate this system so that we can get information and make decisions in the future based on the results of that information. I, for one, intend to come in with an open mind that we may get good or bad information from that, and then make decisions based on that information. And I hope that all my fellow board members are also coming to the table with an open mind to hear what information we get from this analysis.
I agree. We may get positive or negative feedback from the systems analysis, but academics certainly should be one of the things that are a factor in the analysis, but also things like behavior, school safety. I think there are a lot of things that are part of our strategic plan that would need to be looked at to do a thorough systems analysis. And I do trust that Superintendent Gunning, along with Executive Director Vaughn and our purchasing department, do have the knowledge to be able to hire a firm that will be able to do this particular systems analysis for us. And we will learn along the way, no doubt about it. This is the first one that we're doing. This is a specific program that we're doing. We have a wide spectrum of systems that we want to have analyzed over the next 3 to 5 years. So this is going to be step one in that process, and it's not going to be perfect, but we are going to begin the process and learn as we go along and improve along the way.
There's some incorrect statements that were just made that we're not capable of doing it. We had a document called the Transformational Equity Work document, which LESD hid and didn't want anybody to see, and then just said it was some notes despite the fact that they had.
I'm not sure what this has to do.
You know what? You're
with
interrupting
what we're
me. I
talking
have the
about.
floor. You know what? I'm talking on about hiring somebody outside. I would appreciate if you would let me finish and not violate the open meeting law by letting me not talk. We have statistics. You presented them, Kim Moran, at the December 8th meeting about discipline. You compared discipline by race. You compared it by all sorts of things. We have mountains of statistics already. So what are the criteria that we're looking for? If you're looking at discipline, we have the criteria. All the company's going to do is they're going to take the data that we've already have and you yourself have already published on December 8th, and the district has already published in the transformational equity work and probably 5 million other places. So I'm simply saying, you know, that I'm not having an open mind about getting information. I'm all for getting information, but what information is important? We as a board, we should vote. You just said discipline is one of them. Well, we don't need an outside for that. We don't need an outside to determine academics. And I'm not sure what else the outside company is going to do other than massage the data that we give them. Mr. Owen has all the statistics in the world that they're ever going to find. They're never going to be able to come back and recreate what happened and find out any more data than what we already have. So that's all I'm trying to say.
Board Member Honak, are you saying that you are qualified and willing to perform this systems analysis?
We've already done.
Are you saying you are willing and qualified to perform this systems analysis?
I don't know what I don't know. Probably I am. Why is that relevant to it? You've already done it yourself.
No, I have not done a systems analysis of conscious discipline. I have not, and I am not qualified to do that. I would venture to say none of our board members are qualified to do that, nor are our administrators qualified to do that, which is why we are going to hire an outside vendor who has experience in doing systems analysis of programs, because none of us are experts in that area.
You mentioned,
so when we don't know how to do something, we hire someone who can help us to do that. That's the board's role, is to provide those resources to be able to get that information. The board's role is not to do the systems analysis ourselves, because we do all have biases.
We're not talking about biases. I don't know if you can understand what I'm saying. I'm trying to say it in plain English. What criteria are they going to use? And academics is one, discipline is another. Yes, we are qualified to see our academics because Brian Owen has presented it over and over. We are qualified to provide data and analyze our data on discipline because we've done it and discussed it over and over. So this is not, so what other criteria are we talking about? If you have other criteria, then what on earth are they?
Any other board members agree with Mr. Honak that we should not hire an outside consultant for this job?
I just have a question. Has an RFP been put together yet? Who's going to put it together?
We were just in the process of trying to find, like, are there vendors out there that even do such work? And then we would work together to with our director of purchasing to come up with the RFP. to go out to those vendors. And Michael and I were just talking that maybe we bring back the vendors that respond to the RFP to the board and you can select the vendor. I mean, I don't know any of these vendors and I have no connection.
When we
So
put out an RFP that the school district, the board approved conscious discipline, what did it say in that RFP that you wanted the program to do?
when we brought on.
I'm not saying specifically to conscious discipline. I'm saying, what were we looking for in that search?
So as far as for conscious discipline, what we were looking for was character education for our students, as well as something that also contributed to the culture and climate of the organization as a whole, because a big component of it is adult behavior and being able to have self-control and those types of things. So it's broader than just
And
a
academics
student-based.
was a part of it, or was it not?
That wasn't the main focus because it was mainly focused on character education, building strong character, helping students with disciplinary issues, spending more time in the classroom, and having a connection to their school campus, which in turn, right, the more you're in your classroom, the better your academic growth would be.
Then it would be to me, you would take that RFP.
Mhm.
This is what we asked this program to do. You break it out, because there should be bullet items, specifics, a matrix that you're looking at. You develop a matrix that says, is this program performing the way we thought it was going to when we purchased it or we signed the agreement?
Correct.
That to me is your matrix, what you're looking at. I'm disappointed to hear the academics is not in the forefront of programs that we buy in the school district. It should be. And I understand discipline in the classroom impacts student achievement. If I mentioned that classroom I was in which the kids had control, there was no learning going on. It was just a matter of keeping me as a substitute, my head above water until when I was end of the day, I walked out and the principal said something to me. How was your day, Mr. D? That was a mistake. Because I told them how it was and I told them exactly what the issues were in the classroom. So
And everything goes back to student
Yeah.
achievement, right? Because that's why we're here and that's the whole point. And so we know that one of the strong pieces is having strong teachers in the classroom and retaining those teachers. So having that high retention rate like we've had in the past is a priority. And that would be one of, I think, a contributing factor, right? Of something you would look at. You would look at student achievement, you look at growth, you look based on your state and benchmark data, you would look at discipline, you would look at student attendance.
there you go.
You would also look at, possibly I could see some, an organization saying, looking at nurses office visits, number of times that they're actually out of the classroom. And all of those pieces. So I think there'll be a lot of data for the company to look at as an overall program to see if it was effective or not.
Okay. I would like to see personally the RFP at some point, just take a look at it. I mean, you guys, you'll make the recommendation to the board and the board will approve one way or the other, but I just like to see it just as a courtesy.
Yeah, is that doable, Superintendent Gunning?
We can bring back the RFP before we send it out. We could send it to you probably in a Friday update.
It should
I
at least
think he's
include
referencing the
academics.
Original RFP for
Yeah.
conscious discipline,
Well-
not the new one you're sending out. Isn't that what you're asking?
Both the original.
Was it-
Okay,
Yeah, so
It
what
was-
Danielle said, I like to see the original.
The original one was, it's one component of the character education programs that were approved years ago, prior to me, by the district. So I'd have to go back and see, but it was a character education program. And there's a list of them that was approved, prior to me stepping in my role. So I could go back and look for that information.
So you're saying it's
any-
kind of a generic type of thing based on the character.
Because it fell under character education.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think not only is the original RFP something that should be considered, but as time goes on and we as a district evolve, our expectations of what we think the program should be doing today versus what we originally thought the program should be doing are going to be potentially two different things. They might be the same, but they might be two different things. So we need to look at what did we intend to happen? What do we expect to be happening today as well? So I think there's a lot of things that need to be in that systems analysis.
I totally agree. What you just said is, are we getting, you had your goal, reduce issues in the classroom, ultimately will improve student achievement. Are we getting there? And it needs to be benchmarked on a regular basis instead of what, this is 7 years now? Is it about 7? About 7 years?
Maybe, but in any case, it should include math, even if the original RFP did not, or the whatever it was for conscious discipline didn't include math. This analysis that sounds like we're going to go ahead and do should also include the effect on math in any case, no matter what.
But to Danielle's point, if you can find the original RFP, and then once you have your draft or whatever you have on your RFP for the study evaluation, I'd like to see that.
I also just want to remind us as a board that, as Superintendent Genning says, everything that we do points towards academics, but that might not be the first priority. I know that sounds odd to say that, but it might not be the first priority of every single program that we have. And the reason that is because if you look at our strategic plan, right? I mean, we've always said that we serve the whole child. We serve the well-being of the child. We serve, hopefully their families, parents, grandparents, caregivers, et cetera. We want them to be prepared for life. We want them to be able to communicate, to be able to regulate their behavior. We want them to be able to do all of these things so that they can reach their potential and be academically successful. So while I think that everything should point in that direction for academic success, we wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case. But I also don't think that every single priority, the first priority of every single program can't be to increase math scores or to increase ELA scores, because there's only certain programs that are going to do that in a direct fashion. So I think the purpose of this analysis is to say, did we meet the original objective? And is that original objective still our current objective? Are those still our goals? And if they're not our goals, then let's change them now so that during the next evaluation procedure, we can say, hold ourselves accountable, which is how this all came to be in the beginning, is, are the programs that we're paying for and are the programs that we're using throughout our schools not only worth the money we're paying for them, but are they worth the time that we're spent doing that? And I'm hopeful that, through this program and all the rest of the programs that will, or systems analysis that will follow, we'll be able to make those adjustments over time. As Dr. Dowling mentioned, what you start with isn't necessarily what you want to end with. Things change, especially over a 7-year time period. So.
Agreed. Thank you, Board Member Clymer. For the remainder of our meeting, we will convene into executive session, and we are going to be moving over to the district office for that. That portion is not open to the public. So I will move to convene into executive session in accordance with ARS 38-431.03A1 for the purpose of reviewing remediation targets from the superintendent's 2021-22 performance review, and for the purpose regarding 2022-23 performance pay to discuss the performance pay weights as compared to goals. I will second that. Having a first and a second, I will call for the vote. All those in favor of moving into executive session?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We will now move to the district office conference room. Thank you.